Well, everyone, if you want to be educated by a very well-spoken ex-professional rider, today is your day. Our guest, Dan Martin-Jens, that was so much fun.
You can say that again. He gave us a lot of good answers, a good smile. And I love people that they are able to actually make fun about themselves and go, yeah, that was good, that was not so good. No, he was a really great character to have on the show.
And he came on right before his birthday. His birthday is actually the 20th of August. So thank you very much for coming on, Dan. He kicked a lot of knowledge, and I hope that there's a lot of young men and women out there that listen to this. So sit back, relax, and enjoy our Bobby and Jens podcast with Dan Martin. All right, Dan Martin, welcome to Bobby and Jens.
Good to be here.
Well, you're a busy guy. I mean, I've been trolling you on Instagram for, quite a while now. Thank you for your patience. I know that you were busy. You just got back from the tour. You have evidently a new addition to the family that could arrive any day now. So if we do have to stop this podcast because your wife goes into labor, we'll have to do that. That would be a Bobby and Jens first for sure. And gosh, what else could you be doing? You just started a new bike tour adventure experience company as well. Where do you find all the time to do all these things?
All these podcasts, yeah. Somebody gave you my phone number in the end, didn't they, as well? That was when I started getting text messages to jump on this podcast. All right, okay, that's good to know. Because sorry, but thanks to you guys for the patience as well, because it's been a hectic few weeks, and not only obviously new addition on the way, school holidays, and moving house. Was at the tour for 2 weeks, and then running all these other things that I've got going on as well. We've obviously I founded a business a few years ago, and then just founded another little training camp type business here now as well in Andorra, and just trying to ride my bike a little bit as well, just to try and have some kind of fitness, because you still need to be good enough to. I still want to be good enough to try to drop anybody that I ride with, except for the pros, of course. But it's just been you just called me at the wrong moment. It's been a hectic few weeks.
So when you say moving house, from where to where are you moving your house then?
Oh, we just it was a bit of a situation as far as we started building a new house, and then we sold our current house, but then the new house wasn't ready, so we had to move to an apartment now for a few weeks, or a few months rather, and then it's all within about a 2 kilometer radius, but it's still living in Andorra, still loving it here. It's really a great place, we think, to bring up a family and keep fit, and just I think everybody's just really active here. There's such a great community of sports people and a great group of friends we got here, so we're happily settled.
But let's go to Andorra. You were one of the first riders to move there, because people lived in Monaco, people lived in Girona. You actually lived in Girona. What was the impetus to move to Andorra, and why is it so popular now for so many riders?
For me, it was definitely the training, because I was looking around in Girona, and I was really happy there, but there was a lot of riders moving there, and it's quite a small town. And you see, it would get to the point where you'd be walking down the street and you'd always see somebody. You couldn't go to a cafe without seeing somebody, whether it be a fan or also a pro rider. It became quite small, especially the centre. But also, I was looking at my results as a rider and looking around the terrain and speaking to obviously friends in the peloton about how they trained, why the Sky guys were going up to Teide and all that for the altitude training. And I was just thinking, you know what? I'd got to a point where I'd won the Liège, I'd won Lombardia, and I was like, well, I'm one of the best riders in the world at climbs of less than 20 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. But as soon as it got above that, I was really struggling. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, all the climbs around Girona are like 20 minutes long. That's got to be, so maybe I need to progress in the Tour de France and the Grand Tours. I need to actually go and live in the mountains. So we came up to Andorra, just I met my wife in 2014, and then we, my eventual wife, And then and then we came up here in the winter, and we just really liked it up here. And then we decided to move here. And by the time all the paperwork was on and the house was bought, it was we moved up here in 2015. And then instantly, within a few months of being up here, I was just climbing so much better in the Volta Espana in 2015 before I crashed out. So yeah, that was the main reason for me coming up here. Obviously, there are the tax benefits that everybody says, "Oh, that's why you're up here for," but it's genuinely, obviously, that's not why I'm up here now. I think that kind of proves the point. There's no way I get any kind of tax benefit right now, but it's just a really nice place to live. And I think, well, there's 120 pro bike riders here now. I talked to the federation a few weeks ago. 120 pro cyclists living here between the women's peloton and men's peloton, and I think a lot of it is down to, well, one of the reasons I think I'm right in saying one of the reasons Monaco is popular as well with the Aussies. It's a visa situation, because I think it's quite easy to get residency here. So a lot of the Kiwis, the Canadians, Australians, and even the Brits now are all obviously, because since Brexit they need to get an EU visa somehow, and by moving to Andorra, not only do you cancel out the altitude training part of what cycling's become, but also you get to live in Europe effectively. Well, obviously it's not EU Andorra, so that's where the loophole is.
Just a stupid, almost a tourist question. What language do you speak in Andorra? Do you speak Spanish or French, or do you have your own language? And are you able to talk in that language? I'm just curious. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, official languages is French and Catalan. So yeah, I speak French from cycling, obviously, from being at school and cycling, and then I speak Spanish from being at UAE. As that was the language there, more or less, when I was there. But most people speak English now, and there's a massive expat community. All these sports people from different sports, and that's who we hang out with most. But I mean, yeah, it's a tourist place. There's a phenomenal level of English here now, and there's nationalities from all over the world. It's really quite cosmopolitan.
I got to go up there. I think we had a stage of the Tour de France finish up there a couple years. But yeah, I got to put that on my list. But you said, you have a history in this sport. You were educated in this sport. It's very unique situation. Like, your dad was a racer. Your uncle, Stephen Roche, won the Triple Crown, the Giro, the Tour, and the World Championships. And even your cousin, Nicholas Roche, who was on our podcast earlier. Like, how cool was it growing up, not only having family members in cycling, but just really that history of cycling in itself?
I think it really normalized being a pro cyclist. Like, for me, it was just almost like following in the family business type thing. It sounds ridiculous, but I in my, like, the guy who I co-wrote my book with, he got this anecdote out of me, which is like, the guy who won the Tour de France in 1987 and won the Triple Crown was just a guy sitting opposite me eating turkey at Christmas. It was just that it was just normal to be I never grew up having a dream of being a pro cyclist. It was just, if I ever want to be it, it will just happen. And I think that's what really it gave me that, more than ambition. It was a belief that I was going to go to pro cycling. But obviously, being surrounded with it from a young age, just really, I believe it develops a love for the sport that is difficult to gain otherwise. Like, also, I mean, I was on the side of the road from when I was weeks old, watching my dad race, because he was still racing until I was probably mid-90s, so I was 8-9 years old, and then he started again in like the year 2000 before I even started riding still, so it was but my uncle, I never really, obviously he retired before I actually had any concept of what he was doing. So it was, it's not like I was watching my uncle on the television at all, really racing. I probably was, but I was in nappies, I was in diapers. So it's kind of, I think from a very, very, obviously from the moment I was born, my father was incredibly passionate about the sport, and it was just, and still is. And this love was just born into me, and just being surrounded by something your whole life, it's kind of inevitable in some ways that you're going to want to start doing it. But it took me a long time to start riding a bike.
So at what age did you actually and did your first race? And is it true that you actually happened to race with your dad in the same race? Is that true?
Yeah, my first race, I raced with my dad. My first road race. So in the UK, you can't really race on the road until you're 16 years old. So it's a lot of criterium racing. It's a lot of small, like 5 to 10K flat races. And I just being obviously, I'm a little skinny guy. Like I was never going to be good at that. So I'd never really had any ambition. So I just loved riding my bike. From the age, I basically started when I was about 14 years old. Mainly because I got my first bike for Christmas when I was 12, and then obviously did what most people do. They clip into clipless pedals for the first time and toppled over. And I was like, yeah, this is not for me. And then, just did the whole, leaning tower, like just falling tower. And then didn't want to do it until I was, nearly 14, I think I was. And then just started riding as for social. It was just going out with the group on a Saturday, and the weekends, stopping for coffee halfway, riding home, and that's how I started cycling. It wasn't for the racing. And then started racing when I was 16, which, it's obviously people say it's late, but I think it led to it meant I loved riding my bike more than racing, I think.
So,
my dad, the story of my dad, so the first race I did, first road race, it was like literally a week after my 16th birthday. After 5K, there's this big crash, and I'm in the middle of it. It's just like, that's how I started my first road race. So he was not in the crash. He was like, he got me back on. And then, obviously finishing the pack somewhere, but it was not it was interesting, obviously learning from him in that respect.
you say that it was kind of like going into the family business, but you had an opportunity to go and race for La Palme Marseille, the team the amateur team down in France. And I think anyone who has that experience as a foreigner suffers a little bit. So what was your time like when you moved away from home and started racing on a French amateur team? Because I raced on a couple French pro teams, and it wasn't very easy, the transition, to say the least. But, you're 16, 17, 18 years old going and racing with this team. How was that experience?
Yeah, exactly. It was actually when I was 18 when I first went to France, and it was actually a big, Nico Roche played a big part in that, because I basically essentially took his place because he'd just gone to Cofidis. And he turned pro out of La Palme Marseille, got to Cofidis, and I essentially took his place into this team, La Palme Marseille, which had this massive reputation of working with foreign riders, non-French riders. And I think they'd had 6 guys go to what was then World Tour teams, Pro Tour teams, whatever it was called, and that the previous year. And not only foreign riders, but also Irish riders. What that meant was that there was a bit of animosity, because there's a lot of these French guys who'd been kind of stuck there, and they end up just working for these foreign guys. And then at the end of the year, the foreign guys all get the contracts, and then the French guys are still left there, and it's kind of like, you go in there as a new foreigner, and not only is a massive expectation to perform, but because you're this foreign guy, and you're just obviously, because you're in the team, you're good, because you like. But it's also I did French at school for 8 years before I went to Marseille, and I literally barely understood a word when I got there. And I was fortunate though, because I had I was sharing an apartment there was 6 of us in the apartment, but I actually had Daryl Impey in the same apartment as me in 2005. And just around the corner was Philip Dignan. We had another Irish guy called Tim Cassidy in La Palme, and then there was a group of foreigners in the team, but it was still, it's hard, It's this, especially that first year when you're just getting your head kicked in every week, and then there was issues with hindsight. Now you look back and you're like, oh man, I was suffering so bad with allergies, but I didn't find it out till 3 or 4 years later. It was just a case of, I just sucked until May. I absolutely just couldn't get out of my own way. And then suddenly, from 1 week to the next, just the lights came on, and I just started getting results. Or I'd get a result in the rain, because obviously there's no pollen in the rain, is there? So you just be like, you feel amazing for one day, and then suddenly, and so there was always these glimmers of kind of promise, I guess. But yeah, I definitely sucked, and there was a fair bit of, it's you're in a foreign country. Literally, I was earning $200 a month, and you're literally just about enough to pay for your apartment's covers. You don't have many expenses, of course, and it was a great team to be a part of, and it's character forming. That's what you call it, right? It's kind of like this.
Yep.
I think the 1 week in an 8-day period, I spent like 40 hours in the back of the truck, just like driving to races, driving back. Like you're setting off at like 4 a.m. to go ride a race that starts at 12, so you got like a 5-hour drive, and then it's just it definitely forms you, because then you turn pro, and then guys are moaning about taking a Ryanair flight. You're like, oh man, Ryanair? I'm like, yeah. I think the day before the Baby Giro, we had we actually went 2 days. We got lucky that year, because we went 2 days before, because we had a 14-hour drive. So we did 14 hours like in the back of the car down to Naples, and then we had a day to prepare for the 10-day Baby Giro. That was in 2006. Yeah, 2006. So yeah, it's just a different. It's phenomenal, really, when you see how quickly the sport's kind of changed in that respect. Even the amateur guys are not really doing that anymore, right?
97, I was on a small team with a bunch of Australians, and they would events like that. They call them CBT, Character Building Tour. They would just go. You look like you say. Every team goes in the van, goes in their camping cars, and we just in our little cars sitting there like long transfers. They go, yep, CBT again, Character Building Tour. So I know what you went through there. So when did you then first time discover that you have a talent for climbing? I mean, you were always naturally built for it. You're skinny, you're lightweight. When did you realize, okay, I'm actually good at climbing, not because I'm so light, but I have a talent for that? Or did you slowly develop into the Dan Martin we then later as a pro we used to know you?
Oh, obviously, as a junior, I was always like, anytime there was a hill in the race, a climb in the race, I'd be at the forefront of it. And even that, I think growing up in the UK and racing in the UK, it was definitely a part of what became this kind of more like a Liège, Ardennes type terrain. You never get a climb longer than, most races, the longest climb's a kilometre long, so you kind of have to be explosive to make the climbs count. And then obviously, like, I won the Junior Tour of Wales as a junior, which was, I have to put in there because Geraint Thomas, I think Geraint was second and Stephen Kruijswijk was fourth. So it was, but I've always had that because I beat Geraint Thomas on his home race. So actually, the day when he won the yellow in the Tour in 2018, it was, I actually said it to him, like, we were in anti-doping the day before Paris, and I was just like, still have it over you, I still won your home race. So it's I'm pretty sure he'd swap his maillot jaune for the yellow jersey in the Junior Tour of Wales. That's it's definitely going to be a regret in his life. But yeah, I mean, it's way back then, and then obviously any race that I think you still have to train as a climber, and that's what everybody doesn't quite grasp sometimes. I think obviously you have a natural talent for a certain part of the sport, but you still need to work on it. Like the explosiveness that I had, it was always a lot of work went into that. And also obviously the move to Andorra, that says a lot about how your environment forms the type of rider that you are, because you see it across the sport, that if you change your training slightly, it can definitely alter your performance in different ways.
Tell me a little bit, now that you're retired, can you go back and tell us your memories when you went to the Slipstream Garmin, they changed their name so many times, team? Because, man, when, I have a neighbor here that is a close friend of yours, Christian Vaneveld, and he was a big part of that team. And just today, prior to coming on the podcast, I went back and just looked at some of your teammates. You guys had a cast of characters, but it always seemed like you guys had an amazing time. You're still really close friends with a lot of these guys. Tell us about that experience coming to an American team with guys like Ryder Hijsdal, Christian Vaneveld, Andreas Clear was there, Magnus Bagestad, I think, was there as well. Who else am I missing? Dave Zabriskie. I mean, there is a cornucopia of characters in that team.
The Irish guy, the lead out man, the big, strong
Julian D.
warrior. Yes, of course, Julian D was there as well.
And like Tyler as well. Tyler Farrow was also like, yeah, it was no. And then a lot of the American guys as well that I got really close with because I was always on the Younger Riders program. It's funny because I actually found when we showed up at training camp in that November 2007 in Boulder, like Colorado, we've had this like folder of like activities of meet the team, all this stuff, and I actually found it in my clear out when I was clearing out my office last week. It's like it was in this box, and yeah, all these memories just came flooding back of what an incredible team that really was. And I just feel really fortunate to have landed into that as a neo pro because it really did give me the opportunity to kind of be able to like do my own, like not do my own thing in races, but also like have opportunities in races from a young age, from my first year, and just be somewhere that was, as you say, just a great environment of supportive characters. I mean, my first ever training camp, we did, how long was it? I think it was 23 or 24 days in a Holiday Inn in Silver City. And my roommate was obviously somebody you guys know well, Dave Zabriskie. And obviously as a neo-pro, I'm kind of, the first night in bed, you're like, shit, I'm in a room with Dave Zabriskie in the middle of nowhere in the desert in Salt City. And you're just like, it was just this real, yeah. But everybody, it was such a nice way to go into the pro peloton. Just felt no pressure from obviously JV as well. Just never put any real pressure on us. And it was more about the performance and the spirit than the results at that point in the team. And it was obviously as the team progressed, the ambitions became greater. But it was those first few years with a group of young American guys as well, because the majority of the team in 2007 was obviously made up of the old Slipstream team from 2006 or 2007 going into 2008. So yeah, 2008 was my first year. So yeah, but I mean like JV actually tried to sign me for the 2007 season a year earlier, but I told him no because I was like, my mentality on that, I'd just started to win in the U23s in Europe, and my mentality was kind of like, do I really want? I'm just starting to feel good in races and be able to race how I want to race. Do I really want to turn pro and get my ass kicked again, like another 2 or 3 years? So yeah, I actually said no the first year, but then I think it was a great decision because obviously in the end it worked out well going straight into the 2008 team, which really stepped up a level with, yeah, guys like Magnus. And like I wonder if JV actually remembers this anecdote because I went into the first directors meeting and I wasn't a super confident guy. I was quite timid, but I sat down and they gave me my race program, and yeah, it was one of dreams, you know, something that I'd really not even imagined they would hand to me. Like you had the Ardennes Classics on there, like Volta Catalunya, and I was like, wow, yeah, this is one hell of a program. But they asked me, are you happy with the program? And I was like, I looked at the list of the races and I was like, well, you know, I was kind of hoping to lead Magnus into Arenberg in Roubaix, and they all looked at me and they thought I was dead serious. I was like complete, like, they kind of just like didn't really, I was like, and they're like, it was just silence, it's absolute silence in the room. And I was like, no guys, I'm actually really happy. It's cool. Like super happy. So yeah, no, and I think it was just learning that atmosphere and having that group of guys around you as role models as well. So that's why I think that's really a big thing that with Christian, obviously getting to know him so well, he was definitely a role model for me throughout my career.
So now we talked about the team being made up by so many international riders. Maybe not too many people know you actually represented Ireland, right? At the World Championships, for example. How did that come along?
Well, no, I was British and then I switched to being Irish. So it was obviously my family connections being Irish, and it was easier to be British as a junior because I was living in the UK and just all the obviously national series, national champion, and it was all based in I didn't want to be traveling to the Ireland, and so yeah, it was a lot more opportunity as a British rider living in the UK. But then once I moved to France, let's just say life became a lot easier being Irish in France. I think there's definitely it was kind of funny, but it's they definitely have a bit more of an affinity for the Irish than the British. But it was but yeah, I switched in 2006, my first year as being Irish, and yeah, they'd always ask me if I was interested in changing, and at that point it was a case of, okay, let's for more opportunity. I think it was an important move, and also I'd always felt Irish deep down, so it was a case of just the love and support that you get no matter what the result. It was always, Ireland's always a country that as long as you do your best, they're happy. And that's always a great feeling, because you go into races not really with any pressure, because you're going to do your best, and that everybody's going to be proud of you. And the amount of messages you get after, even before I'd changed nationality, I was getting messages of support, so it was from the Irish fans and everything. So yeah, it was, I never looked back.
But when you talk about getting more opportunity by switching from a British passport to an Irish passport, did that have anything to do with your goals in cycling? Because let's face it, back then, the UK had a very, very strong track program, but they didn't really have Team Sky yet. They weren't winning the Tour de France. What do you mean opportunities going to Ireland rather than staying in the UK?
Yeah, exactly that. They wanted to support me on the road, and although it was a weaker country, it was kind of, they were really ambitious behind my potential, and were asking me constantly to change nationality, so having a country that really wants you versus, like, obviously being fortunate enough to be able to, like, make that step, versus with the British track program, it was very much a case of, well, you have to do the track to be within the organization effectively, and it was it wasn't, I just felt more at home there at the end of the day. And I think I've always followed that gut instinct. That's why I chose Slipstream Sports as my first team, because it just felt like I just felt more at ease within the organization, within the people there. And it was the same with Ireland. It was a case of, okay, well, if I'm going to perform well at these events, at the World Championships, etc., I want to be somewhere that you feel listened to and you feel wanted. And that was the opportunities we were looking at. It was a case of, well, let's start the year knowing, like, being able to build to the European and World Championships, and not just worrying about fighting for your place and having to prove yourself all the time, and actually be respected it's an important thing as a cyclist.
And we'll be right back after this short break.
Now back to our chat with Dan. And moving a little further up in your career now with the Grand Tours, Tour de France, you had so many highlights and tragic moments. What would you say if you had to sum it up in one sentence? What was the Tour de Grand Tours to you? I mean, it was obviously an adventure. Bobby and me, we had our fair share of crashes as well. We had our fair share of good moments. But what is left in your mind if you look back at the Grand Tour experiences you had?
It was up and down, wasn't it? I think but every Grand Tour is up and down. And I mean, I didn't crash often, but it always seemed to be spectacular, so it always got noticed. So I was never a guy to get caught up in a 30 guy pile-up that nobody noticed you were there, even in there, and then you just got away nicely. I was always a guy doing a spectacular flip off the side of the cliff or something, So it was yeah, and then obviously all the good moments as well. It's it just went by. I'm sure you guys would agree. It just went by way too fast. And at the time, obviously you so concentrate on it each day that it just, I don't know. It's hard to, you just do your best every day and try to enjoy every moment as possible. And now looking back, it's only when I retired that I actually really took the time to think about what I'd actually done. Because when you're racing every day, there's no time to look back and rest on your laurels. You just want to keep focusing and going for the next race and doing your best for the next race. So it's that was always the thing. I think when doing well on the stage of the Tour de France or whatever, you never really have time to enjoy it. You just gotta, because you have to worry about the next day and then the day after that, and but yeah, I mean, when I look back now and think about what I actually achieved, it still seems a bit surreal, because I'm still just this guy sitting here, in Andorra, and it doesn't, I don't know, it's strange.
Our producer did a little digging, and he said that he found that you kept a journal of your race days. So talking about trying to remember things, I did that my whole entire career. Ever since I was a junior, I had my little training diary notebook. I would write things in there. Jens can vouch for this because he was my roommate for so long. I'd be over there writing something down every day. But did you have that your entire career, especially when you were a pro? Did you take time to write down little notes and race results and things like that?
No, I didn't. I really wish I did, but I did it until when I was still U23, I was doing it, but then it just got, I don't know why I stopped, to be honest. And it was really, looking back now, obviously you see, for one, I can see the training I was doing in the junior, and then people ask, why are these 18-year-olds so damn good? I'm like, I can tell you why they're so damn good. we didn't have a clue how to train as juniors, but it's, no, I didn't do a whole lot, but then I was also, I've also written a lot as far as like diaries for different magazines or whatever, and I've kept a lot of all of those. So I definitely have a bit of a history of my career, but a lot of it's up here still as well. I have a lot, almost like a photographic memory of races and what happened and where they were and towns, and it's quite a skill because I can literally write, especially when you've been like so many Tour de France's. I'd be riding down a road and be like, I remember this road. We did this here. There's a corner here in a minute. Like to that extent, So a bit weird, but it's I do wish I'd get that journal. That's pretty special.
So if you would somehow have the chance to write one page to yourself, 18 years old, what would you write in a diary for yourself, 18 years old, with the knowledge of today? Keep going, all is good, or will be good, or what kind of tips would you give yourself?
I think as an 18-year-old, just like eat more on the bike. That's quite
easy. Keep things easy.
There you go. But yeah, I mean, it's all with hindsight, isn't it? Everything we do is with hindsight, and I think there's I'm pretty proud of the fact that 18-year-old kid started off saying that he was just doing recycling to enjoy it. And I always promised myself that the moment I never wanted to keep going too long, that I wouldn't enjoy riding my bike. And that's why I retired at the end of the day. And that's the thing I'm most proud of, because I wanted to stop when I was still at the top, but also when I still loved racing and loved cycling and loved riding my bike. And I started to feel that slipping. And that's why I stopped. So I was like, you know what? Like, this is becoming a job. And I never wanted that to happen. I wanted just to be able to look at my bike and just be like, okay, cycling's giving me everything. And so that 18-year-old had a really good outlook on what cycling should be for an 18-year-old, I think. And it was keeping things sustainable, never going to extremes as far as the dietary requirements, everything. So I never did extreme dieting. I did one altitude training camp in my whole life, in my whole career. And I met my wife there, in Sierra Nevada, and it was like, so it was kind of this whole, I just wanted to find a balance that I could have a long, enjoyable career. And the results were always irrelevant. And that was the attitude as an 18-year-old, and that's what I still tell him to keep now, because it's just like, the results should be irrelevant. It's the performance you need to be proud of. And as long as you do your best, you need to be proud. You need to be happy.
Wow. That is a Christmas card there. But I need to go back a little bit because I have not read your book, Chased by Pandas, but
shame on you.
But our producer did, and I am definitely going to...
It's in German, the ND as well, huh? The ND's got no excuses as well, because it's in German as well.
Already. Boss, I'm going to go out on Amazon. I actually will text my wife right now. She's going to get it on Amazon Express. We have it tomorrow morning.
But why I bring this up is, like I said, I haven't read it. I'm reading some notes. But you evidently, every chapter is based on a different fear. And fear, we're told, we're from a very young age that we're not supposed to be fearful of anything. But I'm intrigued enough to want to go out and read this book right now. He said that there's the fear of losing a race, a fear of retiring from the sport, the fear of mountains or downhills, the fear of doping, and ultimately the fear of death. Can you give us a little bit more insight into you being so open and speaking about a word that is kind of taboo in this manly sport of professional cycling?
It's exactly that point. I think as in this world today, we're not allowed to express the word fear, and as soon as you do, you get cut to pieces. And like the first time I actually spoke out about it in a race was in the Giro in 2021 after the Strade Bianche stage, and it really blew me away because I kind of went in this first section in I can't remember what stage it was, but the Strade Bianche stage. We came into it, and we were basically going like over 60 k's an hour, 65 k's an hour on gravel, like, and there's guys crashing everywhere. And I just like shot myself. I was like, this is freaking ridiculous. Like, what is this all? And I was like, this isn't worth it, you know? And that has always been my, goes back to what I just said about the performance, but the same as, it's just not worth crashing. It's not worth killing yourself to go and win a bike race. I'm not, even though I was fifth on GC or something at that point, and I was like, no, just stop. They almost stopped, you know. I like got past nearly the whole peloton. I'm like, no, I'm not doing this. This is a joke. I got to the finish, and obviously being up on GC and whatever, it was a lot of media attention, and I got asked. I was like, what happened? And I was like, wow, I just got scared. You know, I wasn't happy there. I wasn't. It was crazy. People were banging bars, like crashing everywhere, and I was like, yeah. Respect to the guys who wanted to do that. No problem, that they wanted to do it, but for me, the risk wasn't worth taking. And I got cut to pieces by people on social media, and also also Eurosport commentators, you know, and they're just saying, oh, he shouldn't be doing it. He shouldn't be racing a bike then if he's scared. And it's like, wait a minute. So here's somebody opening up about fear and opening up about how, I don't think there's a place for that in Grand Tour racing. I got scared, but, you know, fair play to the others, like being honest, showing respectful, but not just showing weakness. And it's like suddenly you don't deserve to have a contract anymore. And the comments like, oh, he's getting paid enough, he should just man up and deal with it, you know. And it's like, wow, what is that all about? You know, it just show what I wanted to write the book to and detail those fears to really inspire the younger generation, all cyclists, to be like, look, even the best guys in the world, they get to the top of a downhill and they're like, it's pissing rain and there's fog, and you're like, well, this isn't good. And you were scared, right? But you have to do it. You get on with it and do it. But nobody talks about that. And I wanted to like tell these kids and be like, no, it's okay to be scared because the best guys in the world are scared. And you know what? I've had messages from not only young cyclists but also pro cyclists who've been like, thank you, because they've actually kept racing, kept believing they're good enough in the sport because of the stuff I've talked about in the book, as far as like the fear of not being good enough. But it's like, I'm like, well, it doesn't matter if don't have that fear, because you just be as good as you can be, you know. And just it's a really complex subject, of course, but I just wanted to, and also obviously it was the guy I co-wrote the book with who he had the idea of structuring the whole book around that. So some of the fear, like title of the chapters are a little bit out there as far as they're stretching the word fear to a bit further than it should be, but some of them are really important to me in the fact that they're meaningful, and it's about, as I say, like showing that honesty and just being open to the young cyclists out there and be like, look, it's okay to have these feelings.
So obviously you put a lot of thinking into this book. How long was that project inside of you and your head? 10 years, 5 years, or only 1 year, and then you worked really intensive on it? Or it was slowly building up to, I want to have this book and I want to have it a little bit like this or about fear? How long did it take you to get your mind around it?
I didn't know if I wanted to do a book until I retired. I think doing the book, I got asked to do the book, and I was like, I thought about it for a while, and I was like, I found it a really nice way to get closure, because I actually sat back and thought about my career. And so, no, it was all from my memories. And it was, I tell you, this book was written very different. One, we wrote it in French, actually, because my author's French. So and how we did it, I lived with him in Marseille, in Le Pont Marseille. He was the press officer for the team, and so I knew him since then. So he's followed my whole career closely. We were very close, and he would send me between 6 and 10 questions every day for about 6 months, and I'd sit down WhatsApp voice messenger and send him a voice note. And so I would basically dictate about an hour in response to these questions. And obviously with all the information, probably about 150 hours of dictation, he collated all that information and kind of together we wrote this book. And obviously it was a long process after that as far as writing, information checking, getting more stories. Because I've got a little bit of as I say, my retentive memory helped massively with this book as far as the little details of this stage in the Tour of Austria in 2014, I hit my top speed at this point in the race, to that level, So it was, it was a lot of hard work, a lot more than I expected. But also, as I say, it allowed me to really sit back and spend, the first 6 months, 7 months of last year, when I had obviously, it gave me something to do in that first year of retirement, so to speak, to really adapt, but also to think about, what I actually managed to achieve, and then to move on from being a professional cyclist and kind of go on to other things.
Well, your book entitled Chased by Pandas is a really good transition into Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Your love of Liège, your title of your book came from a guy running alongside of you in a panda suit when you won Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Can you tell us a little bit about your love of that race and what that race means to you, besides just getting associated with a panda for the rest of your career?
First with the panda, this is a bit of a spoiler, but when I won the stage of the Giro in 21, which obviously in the end was my last win as a pro, I didn't know it at that point I was even going to retire. I hadn't even thought about retiring at that point, but it ended up being my last win as a pro. I get the same messages I had on that day in Liège. What the hell? There was a panda. I'm like, so that's what happened when I finished one in Liège. I get obviously biggest day of my career. Got to my phone afterwards, all these messages about what the hell's with the panda. I'm like, seriously, people are talking about panda. I just won Liège on Liège and talking about panda. Same thing happened when I won the Giro, and I looked back for the images, and there was a panda on the side of the road at 7k to go on the final climb. It's just that is weird, because that's the only 2 times in my career that happened. It's happened on that Liège, obviously a big one, and then the last day of my career. But Liège is just I definitely fell out of love with it once they changed the finish line. I think that mainly because being such a fan of the sport and the history of the sport, the course changes every year. It always changed, slightly. This climb's out, this time's in. But I think that finish at Coutances in the supermarket car park, which it doesn't look like a supermarket car park on race day, but it is. That was a finish I grew up watching as a kid. And when it moved from there, the whole race just it just lost a little bit for me. It's still an incredible race. I was lucky enough to go and commentate for it, which did the international feed this year, and it was just such a buzz being at the start line. And it's the Climbers World Championships, right? It's the Climbers Classic, and I think one of the most competitive but underrated races on the calendar as far as just how hard it is. And I think it's obviously all the monuments are brutal, but if you were going to go out and just ride a course alone, solo, Liège would be one of the hardest, just because there's 4,500 meters climbing, Ardennes, the weather, there's so many challenges as far as the technical little descents, the positioning on the climbs, and just that it's almost like threading the needle for 6.5 hours, that you need to just get everything needs to go right to have the legs in the final to be able to do something.
And what do you think is that, for example, Flanders or Roubaix, there's such a hype around these races? Liège is the oldest race. That's why it's called La Doyenne. Why do you think is it that there's less love or less hype around that race? Also in my eyes, it's one of the most beautiful, iconic and hardest races, of course.
I think the brutality is easier to understand with the cobblestones. And obviously the Belgian, with the Flanders, the Belgian public, and also the way it's raced. You can see the intensity when in Flanders and Roubaix. You know, from an early stage in the race, it's just the guys are warriors. They're finishing with mud all over the face. They're like, it's I mean, even myself. I mean, I think Paris-Roubaix is probably the one race of the year that I would like. Okay, I'm going to try and set an easy day, a recovery day for that day, because I want to watch the whole race. You know, because it's just it's the race we all love to watch. Whereas Liège, it does come across as just another race. There's nothing, unless you know the area, know the race, there's nothing really that special that really stands out, especially as obviously it still appears that the guys just all ride along together and the action happens at the back until the final. Whereas it's the Flanders Roubaix, it seems a bit more like the action's happening at the front of the race just because of the intensity for the fight for position, you know. So it's it is interesting though, because I think there is so much more. There's so much history around Liège with the same climbs being used for forever, and then it's just and a beautiful region at that. But it's always going to be up against the Cobble Classics, I think, for sure.
You know, I'm going to go out on a limb here and call you a thinker. You know, you've said some pretty intelligent things. And one of the thing that blew me away was a couple years ago, you founded, when you were still racing, or co-founded, an investment group called Rubix Venture Partners when you were still racing. Let's face it, cyclists are really good at spending money on watches, cars, fancy vacations, but you come up with an idea of creating an investment firm for athletes. That's amazing, but I need to know a little bit more information. How did you come up with this idea, and how's it going?
It came up from me doing exactly that and having my advisory team around me. Like it started way back in like 2014, 2015, when I had this really decent profile in the UK and Ireland, but endorsements were just hard to come by. And then obviously my best friend of like 20 years now, he's now my partner in Rubix Ventures. He was doing due diligence for me in these venture capital investments that I was making. And then I had guys like other friends in different sports and cyclists asking me, well, how do you get into these things? How do you invest in these kind of small startup businesses? I said, well, I've got this team of, well, not a team of guys, that sounds a bit over the top, but I got these friends who have kind of helped and advised me, and they also wanted to. Together we met our third partner, and yeah, we came up with this idea for an investment business that kind of did some ways to educate sports people, because and also to protect them, you know, because you do get a lot of investment opportunities that, like, I always had these two guys to look at them for me. Whereas to analyze do the due diligence and make sure they weren't just like going to go bankrupt the next week, you know. But also we spotted there was also an opportunity in these growth businesses to really use the athletes, because I mean, what does these smaller businesses, they don't have the budget to be able to pay for marketing with athletes. So if the athlete is an investor in that business, he's more inclined. He's like that was my approach always. I'd invest in a business and then I'd put it on my social media to be like, look, this is a really cool product. It's so cool that I invested in it, you know. And that what kind of, there's no better endorsement than that. So it was that was the basics around it. And obviously I also found that I was learning so much just from getting these quarterly reports from these businesses, that I was like, well, this is something that athletes can also, it can help prepare them for retirement. So it's it's interesting. It's learning. It's been a massive steep learning curve. But yeah, obviously I just feel very lucky to have these guys around me as well, that they really to have this opportunity to be able to start something like this, and yeah, hopefully make a good go at it.
So how many people, or how is your investment then going? You spread all over all different continents, or you go, now we just do Irish or British or American companies and we have 10 people, we keep it like that, or we have 100 people having invested? Like, just give our listeners or viewers like a little bit of an idea of how it functions.
Yeah, we've got I think 61 investors total, And and that's, instead of being like an investment fund, our investors they're all shareholders. Same type of shares that I own in the business. So they draw dividends from our profits. So and we have 24 athletes currently from, I think it's 12 or 13 sports. I really need to shore up that fact. But yeah, so it's, my role has just been about liaising between the athletes and the portfolio businesses. We now have, I think it's 10 or 11 investments. Across the 11 different businesses, and it's completely international. We got athletes from all over the world, and mainly from minority sports. And we're just really, it's been, as I say, it's obviously it's a tough market for the investment world at the moment, but we're doing well. I mean, all the businesses are doing pretty well at the moment, and it's a case of just really, I mean, it's keeping me busy, put it that way. It's a big range of, I mean, there's a big range of size of investment as well, as far as the businesses. Some of them are like, we started our own, we helped like ideate a business from the ground up, it's a sustainable rice brand that's only available in the UK at the moment, but hopefully that'll grow, environmentally friendly rice brand. So called Nice Rice. So that's one that's really, and then there's a golf platform. There's so many different. There's such a wide range of different businesses across the portfolio that, again, I mean, people assume that because you're a cyclist, you're just going to invest in cycling businesses, but that's kind of what we want to try and get away from. It's a case of having a diversified portfolio, and also spreading that risk as far as our investors they're buying into a diversified portfolio already. You know, they're not just investing in one business.
Well, like you said, you're busy. You have a family, everything going on. I have to interject this because it was so funny. I think it was Christian Vandervelde that sent me your contact information, and he just sent me the contact via the phone. And it wasn't Dan Martin. Here's his number. It was Crosswind Dan. What does that mean? Is that the nickname that you had there at Garmin, or just with Christian? What's behind the Crosswind Dan?
It was Miller and David Miller and Christian that I believe it might be more Miller. Miller's always called me Crosswind, but it's between David and Christian. They've always called me Crosswind for some reason. I'm not really sure where that originated from, but it came from the fact that I was like 59 kilos when I turned pro, but I was apparently remarkably good at positioning and good in the crosswind. So they're just like, it was almost like a tongue-in-cheek, like, some days I'd get it completely wrong and just get completely spat out the back, but then other days I'd be right in the front. So it was kind of, I think I had one good day and they penned the nickname Crosswinds, and that was then cursed afterwards, and I was just useless afterwards. But it was that's kind of funny that it's still in there.
And isn't it a good feeling to have like a few of your good old colleagues still have contact after career ends, and we live on different countries, continents, we still keep contact, like just Bobby and me, for example, right? Or probably you and Christian as well. Isn't it a good feeling to have some good relationships keep going, beyond the career?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it shows when you're on the road for so many years and weeks together, you're family, right? And not only that, the experiences that you go through, mainly the bad experiences, mainly the Paris-Nice, or I think you guys are considering international experiences. That's probably the ones that really you get a bond there that you understand each other. And I never really raced with Christian that much, to be honest, but obviously we just got on really, really well. And yeah, with David Miller as well, from the Quickstep team in 2016, 2017, all of that team, we had a real strong bond there. And a lot of us keep in touch still across the directors and riders, So as you say, it was always been somewhat surprising in some ways, the guys you have stayed in contact with, you say, but it's just that, it's our lives, right? It's been important moments, and we should manage to share them with. And when you do literally with guys 3 weeks without a break, you do get those bonds. You end up hating each other or being like brothers, right?
That's absolutely true. 100%. Dan, listen, you are like a professor right now. You mentioned fear, which I really think that people need to know about that. You've mentioned investment, but one thing that you said earlier was if you would write something to your 18-year-old self, it would be eat more on the bike. So I want to know your opinion, your suggestion about diet, because now we have, proven eating issues in the sport. I didn't have a very strict diet. You said you didn't. I know Jens didn't, because he would eat you out of house and home, regardless where we went. But can you give us a little bit of advice, especially to the young men and women listening to this podcast, what you would say surrounding diet and fueling on the bicycle?
I think it's about training your gut to be able to cope with as much calories on the bike as possible. I mean, that's the change in mentality. And I do, again, with hindsight, I actually feel like being at Slipstream was a massive benefit early in my career. And that's why I was able to have the legs to win the age, because we were already doing this fabled 80 to 100 grams of carbohydrate way back then, and without even knowing it. We just got told, yeah, okay, drink 2 bottles in a bar every hour. It's like, okay. And I'm adding it up now that I've stopped. I'm like, wait a minute, that was exactly what we're doing now, and obviously the drinks have improved in quality now. And if that's I've always just stuck to the ethos that I just ate when I was hungry. And to the point that when I was going really good, if I did like a 6-hour train ride, my wife would always laugh at me, because it would be like, literally, when I'd do a hard training block, I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, starving, and just go downstairs and have like a big bowl of cereal. Just be like that, and then just come back to bed, and it's just like just stuff like that, just, I think, how do you stoke a fire? How do you keep a fire going? How do you stoke a fire? You just keep putting fuel on there. And if your metabolism's going, it means your condition's good. So I just keep eating, and just, for whatever reason, I just get skinnier and skinnier, because I think it was a case of my body always understood that I was going to give it enough fuel to keep going good. So, why, and this is obviously I don't do that now. I'm not hungry now, so I don't eat. That's why I'm still kind of okay. It's kind of lean, but I think I just developed this ability to just only eat when I was hungry. And that meant when I was training hard, I was always really, really, really hungry. And because my body knew it was getting the fuel it required, it just stripped out all the fat. And it was just like, okay, I don't need to hold on to stores, because he's gonna give me all the carbs I need to be able to perform. So, and I think I don't know if that's got any scientific basis to it at all, but it seemed to work for me, because anytime I tried to starve myself and lose weight, I always ended up putting on weight. So I was like, okay, let's just eat.
And with your new business now, Like a Pro, are you telling these advice to your guests or clients there? Give us a little bit like an overview of what is Like a Pro, what sort of business is it? What are you doing there?
Oh yeah, that was my business partner, who's a pro triathlete. He came to me one day and he's like, look, there's nobody offering this type of experience as far as opening up my head and sharing my knowledge as far as what it's like to be on a pro training camp, but also in Andorra. And it's such a beautiful place to ride. It's really hard, and I think that intimidates a lot of people. But I think that's also what's beautiful about riding in the mountains. It's like you always just wait at the top. You go with a pro training group, and it's like everybody has to wait at the top. So you just, with an amateur group, maybe just wait a little bit longer for some guys, but it's still I think it was just an opportunity to be able to share. I get asked so often, why the hell do you live in Andorra? Is it just for taxes? I'm like, come and ride here and you'll see. And that's what it was about. It was like, you know what? I want people to come here and see and help, one, help them improve as a cyclist, and two, just come and see how cool it is to ride a bike here.
Well, Dan, what you're doing with that camp you did for our listeners and our viewers today on this podcast, thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge and intelligence with us. Go out, read Chased by a Panda, Dan's book, sign up for one of his camps. But Dan, listen, this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming on Bobby and Jens today.
Thanks a lot, guys. It's been fun.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Huge thanks to Dan Martin for being our guest.
Thanks for listening, and please give us a 5-star review and share us with your friends.
The show was a Velo production in association with Shock Giraffe. The producer was Mark Payne, and this episode was edited by Kirk Warner.
Remember to check out the video version of this podcast by heading out to the Outside Watch YouTube channel. And please follow us on Twitter and Instagram, Threads and Facebook. Just head to Bobby and Jens and send your cycling questions to us.
Dan was known as Crosswind Dan, but who has the best nickname in the sport? Let us know by messaging us on social media at Bobby and Jens.